It's week 3, we're still here, and today we're gonna learn. Gonna be honest, the request for this video was impossible to find because the person who requested this video refused to put the name in the text of the request, so it was nearly impossible to find, and I thought I was going crazy and made up this request. Clarence, you almost caused this video to be cancelled. Nah, I'm kidding, though there was a modicum of panic. But welcome back to Style Study.
Today. Oh my god, what is that? Oh my god! What is that?
But welcome back to Style Study Month, where we take a look at a new style study every single week because I love you and you love the series and it is the season. Today we're taking a look at the adorable, super stylized work of Samuel Youn, and I'm gonna be honest, this is a style that is very different to my usual style, and at the same time, it has probably had the biggest influence on my art from all of these. If you're a style study veteran, you already know how this goes. Timestamps are in the description. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in part 1. But if you're new here, hi, welcome. I am so glad you're here today because we're gonna level up your art by like 1,000,000%. Style Study is a regular series we do here on my channel where we take a look at some of our favorite contemporary artists, analyze their work, and see what we can learn from it. Keyword, learn. We're not here to plagiarize anyone's work or copy anyone's style. We're only here to learn some cool tips and tricks and see how we can apply them to finding our own unique art style. I usually structure my style studies in 3 parts. In part 1, we'll take a look at Sam's work, analyze his style, and see what we can learn from it. Part 2 will be a study of one of his original paintings. The adorable reference I've chosen today is this one. And in part 3, we'll apply everything that we learned today to an original painting of our own. Man, I've done this intro so many times that I didn't even have to look at my notes for that bit. But yeah, so make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and learned something today. And without much further ado, grab a snack, sit back, and let's dive into another style study featuring Samuel Youn. Samuel Youn is an art student and concept artist based in Los Angeles, USA. He currently studies game art at the Laguna College of Art and Design and works as an environment concept artist at Lab Zero. In the past, he has also worked with Riot Games, Sparky Pants, and Arcane Studio. He paints these very distinctive character portraits that are beautifully stylized to be super cute, but also have an edge to them. There is something so dynamic, almost action-packed in even the most basic bust he paints. But contrary to what you may think, he doesn't just rely on the usual elements of appeal that we see in popular art. I'm definitely super excited to dive into that today. His beautiful illustrations have garnered him over 293,000 followers on Instagram and over 16,000 followers over on ArtStation. As we just saw, Sam's art is what I would call super stylized character illustrations that, on the surface, have a very cutesy appeal to them. However, when you really look at his characters, you notice that there aren't the usual design elements that make something entirely cute and innocent looking. However, in my opinion, the most powerful part of Sam's work is his ability to pack a ton of story in a small space. Even though we're mostly only seeing the head and shoulders of each character, we have a sense of who this character is, what their archetype is, what sort of environment they might be in, and so on. And you'll see that this is both in the design and in the rendering. Trust me, it will make sense. Despite not painting a crazy amount of elements and details in his scenes, you can tell exactly what is going on because his art is very symbolist. Speaking of lists, here are 4 key characteristics to Samuel Youn's art. It's been a while since we've looked at proportions on a style study, but there are some really interesting and unique features to the faces that Sam paints. Like I mentioned earlier, there is definitely a cutesy appeal to the face, which as a general rule comes from the large eyes, small nose and mouth, and small but full lips. However, contrary to the general rule, Sam doesn't paint the eyes to be super low on the face, they are usually bang on at the halfway mark. The other non-traditional design choice is the lack of rounded shapes. Apart from the irises, you will see pretty much no round shapes in the facial features. Everything is made up of angles and flat lines. If you do see any curves, they are usually pretty shallow and are directly opposed by a flat line, so they don't actually form any circular shapes. The nose is often minimized to a point where you only really see high contrast around the nostrils, and the bridge is either flat or very low contrast. This pushes that cute upturned nose look, but even so, no rounded shapes. Another thing you'll notice is that there aren't very many tiny elements. The lashes and brows are a great example. Instead of having individual lashes or brow hairs, it is flat, solid shapes. Generally, the lash line kind of flicks off at the outer corner of the eye, which also further enhances that angled cat eye look. In fact, in the pieces where the character's ears are showing, even the earlobe is made of several straight lines, rather than one rounded curve like we normally see. So I'd say the positioning and sizes of the facial features really push the cuteness of the face, but the actual shape of the features adds a bit of dynamism and edge to the characters. As a result, you'll see them as sweet but generally grown-up characters rather than literal children. In fact, in characters that he wants to make look younger on purpose, you see that Sam uses a lot more rounded shapes and softer angles. This is definitely something to keep in mind while we're aging our characters. The contrast between the round and flat lines is a really quick way to show how old they are. Since his characters are pretty much all human, one of the biggest elements in Sam's paintings is the skin. So let's talk a little bit about how the skin is rendered. The very first thing I notice is that the highlight tone, which usually covers most of the face, is one flat color. While the mid-tone and shadows are made up of multiple tones, the highlight is pretty much always one solid color. The mid-tone, which you generally see only around the nose and at the top of the chest, is a color that is only slightly shifted from the highlight. Because of this, while you do see a slight darkening around the nose and the eye, it is just visible enough to show form without creating harsh contrast. Where you do see contrast is in the shadows. Not only are they significantly darker than the highlight, they are also very hard-edged. However, there are multiple shadow tones he uses, which are usually a mix of warm and cool shadows. Since the vast majority of the portraits are warmly lit, he pretty much uses warm, saturated shadows all round. However, you will sometimes see a cooler tone within the larger drop shadow on the neck. This to me feels like a great way to add the tiniest bit of contrasting color in order to balance the temperature of the skin. There is always a shadow under the inner corner of the eyebrow, which not only indicates the eye socket, but also further narrows that inner corner, making the eye look even less round. Along with the shadow under the jaw, this tells us that the faces are almost always lit from above. One final thing I'll say about the skin is the sketchy outlines that indicate form. You won't see these inside the skin, but just at the edges of the jaw, the shoulders, the hands, and also under the hair if it flops over the face. These are usually colored red or orange and are a great way to add definition to the form of the face without adding any additional shadow or texture. Let's talk about the most dynamic element in his art, and that is the hair. The characters all have very distinct hair that not only frames the face, but forms the incredibly dynamic silhouette. However, you will see that Sam doesn't paint or texture hair to be realistic, in that you won't see strand detail, at least within the body of the hair. You'll likely see some strands in the silhouette, but those are there more to balance out the larger shapes of the hair rather than purely to add realistic texture. Note, the hair itself is actually very blocky, where you see the smallest unit of the hair is an individual section rather than an individual strand. And even within the sections, there are no round elements, only flat, hard-edged shapes. In terms of color, the hair usually creates a strong contrast to the face and is usually significantly darker than the skin. But even if a character has pale hair, you'll see that A, the shadows within the hair are much stronger than the shadows in the face, and B, there are some strong shadows at the hairline and anywhere that the hair and face interface, which allows the two areas to appear well separated. And more often than not, you won't see too much glossy highlight in the hair unless the character's primary purpose is to look pretty. In the more, quote, functional characters, where their primary appeal isn't prettiness, you likely won't see that glossy highlight. What you do see, regardless of the character's role, however, is a strong rim or edge light hit one side of the hair. And if you watched last week's video, you already know why rim light is such a blessing. It is because it instantly adds drama, but it is also super handy when it comes to indicating the form of the hair. Plus, it adds more contrast and even more angular shapes, which then makes the hair look even more dynamic. This is the hardest one to break down for me personally, because you already know I do too much. But the one thing that really struck me about Sam's work is the fact that he can do so much with so little. He can tell complex stories without painting an elaborate background, but rather simply by adding a couple of little design elements. The easiest one of these is when he carefully picks the design of the hair and the accessories. Here, for instance, the flowers and ornaments tell us that this is a character dressed in traditional Korean clothing, even though all we see of the actual clothes is just about the shoulders. Here, the cat ears and claws tell us this is a Catwoman type character, despite being such a tiny addition to the piece. Here, the asymmetrical hair and the double pierced ears tell us that this is more of a rebellious character. There are other character elements that can highlight the stories even further. Here we have a character with flowy, wavy hair and puff sleeves that gives us Disney princess vibes, whereas here we have a character with not just some incredible sleeve tats and ear piercings, but also a couple of plasters and wearing a basic white tank top. I don't know about you, but I immediately thought of Trudy from Avatar. Another big part of storytelling is the expression on the character's face. Are they smiling innocently, showing youth and playfulness? Are they standoffish in a dark room? Do they look angry with their narrowed eyes and furrowed brows? The expression is something we don't often consider when painting a portrait, but it can add a ton of story in a super subtle way. Finally, let's talk about how he further enhances the story via some simple background elements. Most of the time, Sam paints a rather flat background, but in some cases you see some extra symbolic elements such as flowers and leaves. So here she's surrounded by little sunflowers that make us feel like she's sat in a field somewhere, even though there is pretty much nothing else in the background. Here, the floating petals echo the wind-blown fabric, making us feel like she is outdoors, even though the background is a dark blue. And here you see some glowing goldfish floating about her face, which is really trippy because are they an illusion or is she underwater? These are such simple elements, but instantly elevate the concept so significantly. So to sum up part 1 of this video, here are the 4 key characteristics to Samuel Youn's art. Number 1, the size and positions of the proportions of the facial features tend to add to the cuteness of the face, but this is directly contrasted by how the shapes of the features have little to no roundness and are instead made of straight lines and sharp angles. This adds an edge to the characters. 2, the skin is rendered with flat shapes, particularly in the shadows. The majority of the face is usually painted in a single flat highlight tone, and all the colors in the skin are generally the same temperature. 3, the hair is a huge silhouette element and isn't rendered realistically, but rather Sam paints it to be very blocky and stylized. But again, no round shapes, it is all made of straight lines and hard edges. And number 4, he tells complex stories with very simple design choices and elements, including the hair and accessories, the facial expression, and very simple but effective background details. For our study this week, here is the reference I've chosen. I specifically picked this one because your girl hasn't done a side profile in a while. I started with a super rough pencil sketch, but then decided to switch things up and went straight in with colors on my second cleaner pass of the sketch. I figured this would save time later in the process, and I think it really did. From here on out, it was just a simple process of putting down flat colors and trying to get them to match the reference as best as I could. One thing I did struggle with was getting the likeness. That front eye was really bugging me, and I ended up resizing and repainting it a couple of times just trying to get the size and shape right. My biggest struggle, however, was the hair. This is something I face all the time when studying a stylized painting, because if you think about Sam painting the piece, the hair was probably built up in layers and it probably came together in a very specific order over time. However, when you're studying the finished painting, it can feel a little overwhelming to have all these crazy, unusual shapes to place without having any guidelines. It was for sure a process, and I definitely had to go back and redo the rendering and the silhouette while also trying to nail the value and saturation. That said, however, this was definitely my favorite study of them all, just because look how cute the end product turned out. Bro, when I tell you this painting came together quick, literally I was done in 2 sittings. I had a vague idea in my mind of a bratty character where I wanted her to have a bit of an entitled smirk while also looking bored, and I for sure wanted stars and planets around her head to show how she thinks the world revolves around her. Plus, I found a really cool reference on Pinterest where the model had this shiny, super saturated red hair, so that was for sure happening. With this one, I decided to go with a black sketch to start with and then paint over it when I decided the rest of the colors. And having learnt my lesson from the study in part 2, I decided to first go in and sort the hair out. And as predicted, it was much easier to do the hair here because while I was trying to achieve Sam's style, I wasn't trying to copy every mark off of a reference. So it was definitely a lot quicker to work through, and man, am I in love with this hair color. Low-key wanna dye my hair this red, no one tell my mom please. I went with a darker skin tone for my painting just to see how the style would transfer to a deeper skin color, and it worked super well. I also went in and darkened the background just to make those stars and planets pop, and realized this also really made her hair pop. You'll love to see it. This time I made sure I flipped the canvas because that is a step I forget too often. Luckily, there weren't any massive ugly bits to fix, which is rare, let's be honest, but that jewel was definitely wonky. I then went in and hardened up some edges even more, just because you know I love my hard edges. It adds some nice interest and texture, and while Sam doesn't always add specular highlights to the eyes, I couldn't not add them in. They just instantly make the eyes come alive. And with that, here is the final painting, and oh my gosh, I am in love. So there we have it, Samuel Youn demystified. Honestly, this study in particular has really made me rethink proportions and such in terms of appeal. But what do you guys think? What was your biggest takeaway from this study? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much again to Clarence for requesting this video. I really hope you liked it and that it's been everything you've been looking for. And if the rest of you guys have enjoyed this video and learned something today as well, please do remember to like and subscribe. And next week we're gonna have the final style study of the year, which is my personal favorite artist of this entire year. So make sure you have your notifications turned on so you know when that drops, because it's gonna be a good one. Also, come say hi on Instagram and Discord. I'll leave the links down below. And if there are any other artists you'd like to see a style study on, first check out my style study playlist. I'll leave it up here in the outro. I've done tons of these already. Chances are I've covered some of your faves on the series before. But in case I haven't, feel free to leave a comment below letting me know which artist you'd like to see a style study on. Or better yet, come tell me in the Discord server. That way your comment doesn't get lost in the comment section below. But yeah, that's all I have to say today. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I really hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Check out some more style studies up here, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!